Hi, my name is Eli Rogers. That was amazing. I'll be reading the scripture reading today from Acts chapter 2, beginning verse 4 to verse 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles, teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. The grass withers and the flower fades.
But the word of our God will stand forever.
All right. Thank you, everybody who made that really fun. Okay. Is this on? It is. Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. My name is Buck Rogers again. I'm the pastor here at Christ the King. I want to welcome you again, especially those that are visiting for the first time or you've been coming a little bit. We're so glad that you're part of what we're doing. We're very encouraged that you're here. Each August, our church sort of makes a point to stop and to rethink who we are. And so in August this year, we've really been looking at what it means to be a disciple, what it means to be someone who follows Jesus. And this week, we're going to conclude that series of sermons by looking at the question, what is a healthy disciple? But before we look at Acts chapter 2 to answer that, what Eli just read, I want to ask if God would come and help us by praying together. We're going to, just as a reference point, today we're going to talk a little bit about discipleship. Next week, Rich is going to preach to us. And then the following week, we're going to start a brand new sermon series on the book of Colossians, which would be delightful, and it's going to really emphasize everything that we've talked about because it is such a poignant picture of Jesus and how much he matters in our lives. So let's pray now and ask God to bless our time as we look at Acts chapter 2 and what we're going to do in the future. Let's pray. Father, we give everything and everyone to you. We stop. We realize our restlessness. We know that this past week has put pressure on us with the responsibilities of life here. And next week is scary as we look into the future and all that needs to be done. So we ask right now, Father, that you would help us, that all the things that we're worried about in the future, that you would help us to give them to you and that you would take them. And all the things in the past that plague us, our baggage, the hard things we've dealt with in our lives, that we would give them to you and that you would take them. And that right now in this moment, you would come and that you would help us as we look at what your word says about following you. Help us, Lord Jesus. We ask in our Savior's name. Amen. What are you like when you are healthy? Okay? What are you like when you are a healthy person? I know that like in our family, we talk a lot about health so much that Eli gets really frustrated with me about it all the time. And I talk about it a whole lot. And each one of us talk a little bit about what it looks like in our lives when we're healthy. We try to dream of a picture of like, this is what a healthy buck is like. And I know, for example, that a healthy buck spends time with God alone, that a healthy buck exercises his body somehow, and that a healthy buck enjoys his life, particularly enjoys his family. I've come to that conclusion that when I look back on my life and I've seen myself healthy, those things are things that I do. I want you to do me a favor. Open up your bulletins and let's look at the first picture. All right, so today's Kids of the King Sunday, so instead of having reflection quotes by C.S. Lewis and Bonhoeffer, we have pictures from the Children's Storybook Bible. So let's look at the first picture here. I think some of these guys have been studying about this first picture. All right, what do you see here? What's happening in the first picture? Does anybody know who the person on the right is? Anybody? Jesus, that's right. Jesus is the person on the right. And here we have a picture of the disciples dropping everything they're doing, leaving their nets to go with him, just what you were singing about a minute ago. And the Bible talks a lot about how we are at the healthiest on the inside when we follow Jesus. That we're healthy people when we drop all these other things and we go after him first. Okay? And in Acts chapter 2, we get to see the same guys that are following Jesus in this picture, plus a few more, after they've followed Jesus for 3 years. So they've had a lot of experience, right? They've been around him a lot the last 3 years. And they're even healthier than they were the first time. And today what I want to do is I want to look at what a healthy follower of Jesus looks like and how we can be healthy in our hearts. It's very simple, okay? What does a healthy follower of Jesus look like, and how can we be healthy in our hearts? Now, as we look at how these folks were healthy, we see a lot of great things in Acts chapter 2. And we have written a little summary in our church of what a healthy disciple looks like. It's printed in your bulletin. If you want to look there, it's in the sermon section. Right underneath, I guess is my name. It says, what is our description of a healthy disciple? And it says this: a healthy disciple is seeking to enjoy Jesus, lives in Christian community, grows in dependence on God, gives themselves to the kingdom, and makes other disciples. That's a little summary of what a healthy disciple does. And we see that in Acts chapter 2 in lots of ways. Now, before I jump into the passage and we look at those 5 things together, okay, the first thing I want to say is that notice it says that a healthy disciple is seeking to do these things in their life. In other words, being a disciple is less about like being in or being out, like, hey, I'm a disciple, or hey, I'm not a disciple, but more so about your trajectory, about where you're going, what it looks like to be on a destination in your life. Or going in a direction in your life. And if you look at the people in the picture, again, in the very first picture, those guys are all moving in a direction. Where are they going in the picture? Where are they going? Yes, they're going towards Jesus in the picture, right? They're seeking to put him first, even above their jobs. They're fishermen, right? They're leaving their nets to go after Jesus. Even their families. They're leaving and they're following this man for the next 3 years of their life, okay? So moving after Jesus, being a disciple is something or a direction that we're moving in our lives. And this means that the very essence of our faith is moving towards God. Our lives as disciples are about turning away from the things that we like to do or the things that make us, that we really want more than anything else, but turning to Jesus, to turn away from things that want to pull us away from him to him. I'll never forget one time somebody demonstrated this for me, and I think it's a helpful thing for you to know too. I want you to imagine that you're kind of living your life and you're moving in a direction, okay? And most people, when they're living their life, they're moving in the direction of kind of doing what they want, right? I'm going to go do this particular thing. I'm going to live my life for this particular career that I want. Or, I'm going to live my life for this particular pleasure or comfort that I want in life. And I'm moving in this direction. And anybody in this room that's a Christian knows that something as you were moving in that direction happened. That you heard something that said, that's not a good direction. That's not the safe direction. That's not the direction of hope. And we hear this message called the gospel about Jesus that makes us turn away from things, those sort of objectives and things in our life and start going in a different direction. We turn away from living life for ourselves and we turn and begin to move our lives for someone else. And that other person that we begin to live our lives for is Jesus himself. That's the idea. All of us were running in one direction, and something happens and the direction changes and we begin to move toward Jesus. Now, this is the tricky part, is that not only does that happen in the beginning of the Christian life, but it happens every day. Because as we're following Jesus, we get tempted to move back toward whatever the shiny thing is that we like so much, right? We get tempted to move back. Oh, my family is important. I have to do these things for my family. But like Jesus gets in the rearview mirror, you know? Or, you know, my job is really important right now. I've really got to give all this emphasis to my job, and Jesus is in the rearview mirror. And so the Christian life, the life of a disciple, is this life of always turning, of turning back, of moving back, of going back toward him. So I think it's important for us to realize in the very beginning that following Jesus is a turning, and it's a constant turning in our life, a life of repentance, of going back to him and moving in the right direction, okay? Now, what does that direction look like? Well, what we see in Acts chapter 2 are sort of 5 little pictures of health in the church. The first is that we see that a healthy disciple is someone who is enjoying Jesus. I'm going to show you a few of the verses. Verse 42, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and prayer. Verse 43 says that everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. So the apostles, who were sort of like the first leaders of the church, taught the gospel. They shared this good news about Jesus. And they also did miracles, like healing people's bodies or casting out demons, and that showed the gospel. The gospel is God's going to fix us, right? And he's demonstrating it with miracles. And all of this showed that these people loved, embraced, and desired what? Jesus. Above everything else. He was what mattered most to them, right? They loved being around Jesus. They enjoyed Jesus more than anything else in their lives. They had this joy. Joy, I'm going to give you a little simple definition of joy. Joy is a state of being where we delight in the truth that we're okay, that we're not alone, and that God is going to fix what's broken in the end. Okay? It's a state of being where we delight in knowing the truth that we are okay, that we are not alone, and that God is going to fix what's broken in the end. So joy remains even though our circumstances change, right? You can be going through a really hard thing like Paul when he was locked in prison, but he's full of joy because he knows he's okay, and he's not alone, and God is going to fix what's broken in the end, right? So that's the idea that we're people that are full of joy. The other day we were in a staff meeting, and we were talking about joy and enjoying Jesus. And Steve was saying that he looks out at you guys each week. He gets the bird's eye view, you know. And he's looking at some of you, and like that you're like, there are certain points in the service where you're like, look at your spouse, and he's like, these people really enjoy being married to their spouse. Like they can making googly eyes, right, at each other in the service, you know. Or that they're looking at their children or their parents that way. Or when you come and take the Lord's Supper, that you're truly delighted to be. There's a joy, right? This feeling when we're together, this knowledge when we're together that we're okay and that we're not alone and that God's going to fix what's broken in the end. So a healthy disciple is someone who has that sort of joy. A healthy disciple is also someone who seeks to live in a community, particularly a Christian community. It says in verse 42, they devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Verse 44, all the believers were together and had everything in common. And verse 46, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Notice something about the whole thing that we just read. It's all in the plural. Okay, grown-ups knows what that word means, okay? It means that it's talking about not individual experience, but what everyone is doing together. And the bottom line is we're made for relationships, right? We're made for community. God created us that way. You know, you were created in the image of a God that is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and have been in that relationship forever. And so being made in that image means that you're made. That's why when God created Adam, he was not suited. He was deficient. He needed Eve to be created so that he could be complete. How many of you, have y'all ever seen the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks? Right. You remember he's stranded on this island, right? And who does he become friends with? Wilson, the volleyball, right? So much so that when Wilson eventually floats away, he's like bawling, you know, because he's losing his only friend. And why is it that he's that way? Why is it that a man would have this sort of attachment to a volleyball? It's because, yes, he was made in God's image and he needed relationships in his life, just like you. right? We need relationships in our life. We're made for it. Not only are we made for it, but we're redeemed. Jesus redeems us to have relationships. Jesus didn't just save you. He saved you into a family, into a group. That's why he calls the church his wife, his bride, right? That you need both of them. You're brought into a Christian community. We're destined for relationships. Heaven is going to be a place where we're all hanging out with each other, okay? It's not a place where you're just by yourself all the time, even though some of us may like that. Two applications about this real quick. One is that community like this becomes an idol when we keep people out, okay? If you notice, Jesus is all about new, weird people coming into his group. He hangs around with prostitutes, and he hangs around with tax collectors, and he hangs around with Pharisees. He hangs around with all sorts of people, and he wants them to become part of his community, all right? And so community can quickly be an idolatry when we try to keep people out. It's meant to be a place where people come in. A second is that when you're in pain, we need to move toward the community and not away from it. You need to move toward it. Now, if you're anything like me, when you get sad or you're going through a hard time, you want to isolate. You want to get by yourself and just mourn, be sad by yourself. And that's okay. But the bottom line is when we're really hurting, we need each other. God has created a community for us to be safe in, to belong in, to be loved in when we're going through painful things in our lives. Sometimes when I think about this, I think about those strange Animal Planet videos, where the lion is trying to catch some small animal. And, they just don't go after the animals that are in a pack. They always go after the one that is alone, right? And the same is true with the evil one and us. When our tendency is just to wander away and to stay away from the Christian community when we're hurting, I think many of you know, just like I do, the pain that brings, the things that you think in your mind without your friends saying, no, that's not true of you. To bring you back to Jesus, we need one another. So you're created, a healthy disciple is created for community. We're meant to be in it. A healthy disciple is also seeks to grow in dependence on God. I know that sounds a little strange. Let me read a few more of the verses. Verse 42 says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Verse 43 says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the disciples. And then in verse 46, it says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Okay. All of these texts describe a way of dependence in the church. The people in the church wanted God's input and influence on their lives. They wanted it. They invited it in. We want the apostles' teaching. We want to see what the apostles are doing. We want to break bread together in our homes. We want to be around Christians and disciples and hear about their experiences. I'm inviting that into my life because I need it. I am a person by nature that needs help. I need help. If I were to ask you what makes a godly person, what would you say? I think some of us would say, the really godly people that I know are really smart. They understand the Bible, right? They understand theology. And some of us may say, a really godly person I know is good. They do good things. They're kind. They have this disposition of kindness in their lives. Maybe you think about somebody who's really holy as somebody who keeps all the rules, who doesn't make mistakes. But you can learn a lot and you can do a lot of good and you can follow all the rules, but we're really far away from God. There are a lot of people in the Bible that did all that, but we're really far away from him. And there were a lot of people that had really, really screwed up lives that were very near him, right? And so the measuring stick for us as Christians as to whether or not we're growing is not goodness and it's not knowledge, it's dependence. It's how close you are. It's whether or not you have a posture of needing God in your life. That's what he wants from us, is for us to understand our need for him and to follow him. C.S. Lewis used to talk about how when you have a little baby and the little baby's born into the world, the baby is completely dependent, right? Needs the mom and dad to take care of everything. And as the baby gets older, they're able to do things on their own. Like Abby's now, she can walk, and I saw her eat her cereal all by herself this morning. Hooray. And you get older and you can do more things. Then you can drive a car like Eli. Good night. And then, you keep getting older, and you take on and you become more and more responsible, more and more independent, right? And what Lewis says is that that's the way a normal human being works, but spiritually, it's the opposite. Is that you start out coming into this world, and you're independent. You do what you want. Everything's about me. I'm the center of the world. Give me what I want, right? And knowing Jesus and being in the kingdom and following him is more and more about that decreasing in your life, and you becoming more and more dependent over time. And so that's the picture we see. Disciples are people who are becoming more and more dependent on God in their life. Fourth, a healthy disciple seeks to give themselves to the kingdom. They're giving themselves away. Verse 44, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Now, a lot of people know that this is often used as a passage to proof text socialism or communism, but it's actually a simple call to live gratefully, to be people who realize that you have an abundance, and to be a Christian means to share it. That's really what the call of the passage is. It's describing a community that shares with people. And that sort of kindness only comes through the realization that you have a lot because you've been given a lot, right? Steve said this eloquently earlier. Each week we have a moment in our service where we pause and we think about what God has given us, because we realize, my job is not to come in here and ask you for money. You know what to do with your money, right? But what we do is we come in and remind you of where the money comes from, right? That God is the one who has given you everything that you've ever had in your life. And because he has, my hope is that you'll be grateful and you'll be generous with your life, just like God is generous with his. It's an application of the gospel in our lives. The disciple's life is marked by gratitude. Jesus gives, and the church gives and grows because Jesus gives in our lives. The disciple sees that he's received and is therefore compelled to give their life away. Before I was a pastor, I worked with RUF, which is our denomination's ministry to college students. So I was on a college campus for about 8 or 9 years at Mercer University down in Macon. And we're sort of like a missionary. The way the PCA does it is they'll take an ordained guy with a family, and they put him on a college campus to be a missionary to the college campus. And in doing so, they're supposed to raise up Christians on the campus and send them out into churches. That's kind of the idea. And so I did this for about 8 years of my life. And what was the hardest part about RUF? Bottom line was raising money. It was really hard to raise money. But what you begin to find out over time, and this became abundant to me early on, is that you're seeing people that are giving to the ministry because they love the idea of college students knowing Jesus. Maybe they've had an experience, where they became a Christian in college, or they desperately want their kids to have this sort of influence in college, and they're more than willing to give toward it. More than willing. They want to give their money to RUF. And I'm just a poor minister, and what I'm seeing over time is people that don't have very much at all being willing to give money to see this happen to college students. And after you see that for a bit, you begin to see these people have been radically changed by God, that they want to give their money away. Guess what happens? I wanted to give mine away. And that's the picture here, is that we see God giving all the time, and we begin to give ourselves away for the kingdom. We give our time away, which is probably our most valuable resource. We give our energy away. We give our money away. We give our homes away. We give ourselves away for the sake of this kingdom, which is much bigger than we'll ever be, so that we can see Jesus become famous here. Last one, a healthy disciple seeks to make other disciples. It says in verse 45, they broke bread in the homes and ate together, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people, and the Lord added to their number those daily who were being saved. Okay, a few things to notice. One, these folks were on a mission that practically starts in their homes. You see this? It talks about it several times in the passage. They're having people in their house all the time, okay? One of the reasons we want to have community groups and discipleship groups and et cetera in our church is to begin to get you to buy into the idea that you want people in your house. You want people in your house because the gospel goes forth in your house. Not just an hour on Sunday mornings where you hardly get to talk to each other. But having people in your home that you don't know, talking to them about the gospel, talking to them about things that matter, just getting to know them as friends, sharing your own life story and how Jesus' story has come into your own life. What would it be like for you to open your home up for gospel work? How is it that our kids are so much better at welcoming non-Christians in their lives than we are? So much better. We have a lot to learn from our kids, just in regards to having non-Christian friends and having them in our home, so on and so forth. It says that they were enjoying the favor of all the people here in the end, and that means it's not talking about the people in the church. It means all the people around them. That means that they had a good reputation in the community. People liked this group because of what they did. That they were sharing their lives with those that were not following Jesus. That they were welcoming outsiders into their community before they ever believed anything. And then God was adding to their number, right? God was adding to their number. We are so completely dependent on God for that. Listen to me. If you don't hear anything else I say to you today, I know you're all afraid of evangelism, just like me. And knowing that God added to their number should set you free. All you got to do is just hang out with people. God changes their hearts. Hang out with people that don't know Jesus and pray for them. Do what you can. Be faithful. Live faithfully with people in your life that you work with, that you play with. And believe that God can change their hearts. Sometimes this takes a very, very long time. I think Lewis, once said that he had been praying for a person for a very long time, and it took like 12 years, and then God finally converted the person that he'd been praying for almost every day. God is the one doing this work, not just us. I can remember very poignantly sitting down with a girl when I was doing RUF years ago. She had been coming to our ministry for a really long time, Christian family. I knew her. I had conversations with her. She comes up and talks with me about the sermon each week, involved in our groups, that sort of thing. And I sat down with her, and I was going to ask her if she wanted to lead a Bible study. And so I sit down and I'm having a conversation with her, and I'm saying, hey, I want to hear a little bit more about your story. Tell me about, when did you become a Christian? And she looked at me and just started crying. I was like, I don't know God. I don't know him. She'd been living in the community and did not know God. And that day we prayed, and she received Jesus. Sometimes it's just sitting down with someone and asking questions about their heart that really matters. Okay, last question, and then we're done. Here's a picture of what these guys look like, healthy disciples. We see a picture of it, right? This is a description, not a prescription, but a description. How do we become healthy? How do we become healthy people? All right, kiddos, last one. Look at the picture, the second picture in your bulletin. Second picture. On the bottom, what is wrong with this dog? He's got COVID. Oh my goodness. I hope if I get it, my arm doesn't get broken. So this dog is sick, isn't he? He's sick. His arms hurt. He's sweating. He's drinking tea. His nose is sniffly because he's got Kleenex on the bed. He's sick as a dog, right? That was the whole joke lined up for you, okay? He's sick. How do you think the dog gets better? How do you think a dog that's sick gets better? How does a person get better? Last week, Rosie was sick. That's why I wasn't here with you. And she got sick on Friday, and it was okay. It was pretty bad. But then on Saturday, she got really sick. We gave her vitamins and medicine and stuff. Didn't get any better. Didn't get any better. So what did we do? We took her to the doctor, right? And the doctor checked her out, looked at her, told us what was wrong, gave her medicine, and Rosie feels great today, right? Do you know that one of the names that the Bible gives for Jesus is that he's called the Great Doctor? This is not only because he could fix people's bodies, which he could, but mainly because he fixes people's hearts. You know, the part of us that knows God and connects with God. So if you feel like you are unhealthy in your heart. Like you do when you feel like you're not okay with God. Or, when you do something bad and you feel like you can't be forgiven for it. Or when you feel alone. You just need to go to the doctor. I mean, ultimately, that's what health is like for the Christian. You go to the great physician. You go to Jesus. And you ask him to help you. Being near him, following him is our hope for health. It's not trying harder. It's not techniques. It's not being involved in 1,000 things. It is really basic. It's abiding. It's getting near the fire. It's getting near Jesus and finding your health there in him. When I was in college, I went through this period in college where I started hanging around with people who did not like God or love God very much. And over time, as I hung out with these people, I became like them. I started doing bad things that I wish I wouldn't have done. A friend of mine that loved God, finally, after a period of this, came to me and he said this to me. He said, Buck, I know that you feel like you're lost right now, like you've gone too far away from God, but I remember never forgetting. He says, but I miss you, and God misses you. Will you come home? And I did, and it took a long time, but God began to make me healthy again. And I know there are a number of you who maybe have given up on the church, you've given up on Jesus. That's hard for you. You feel like things have gone too far. You've sinned too much, and he's too far away. And what I want you to know is that you can come home. All you got to do is come to Jesus. And so will you come to him today and ask him to make you healthy? Let's pray and ask him. Father, we ask now that you make us healthy people, that you would, we realize that we don't get healthy by exercising more spiritually, but that we do get healthy by coming to you, by asking for your grace, by trying to get near to you. And Lord, some of us have been trying to do that and it's hard. Some of us feel like giving up. So I pray that this family would keep you near to us. And Lord, that you would be at work in our lives. Help us, Father. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.